Good evening. After a two-day manhunt, 2 sleepless nights, law enforcement have apprehended Vance Bolter. That's 48 hours that law enforcement involved in a complex and dangerous man.
Tim Walz, I don't know who thought he was a good idea. He was like a second iteration of Tim Kaine, but even worse. He turned out to be a pathologist.
Tim Walz thought he was playing chess, but Lindi Li flipped the board, stole the queen, and started juggling pawns with a cup of tea in hand, turning politics into a full-blown roast with plot twists Netflix couldn't script, cracking open Walz' Fort Knox secrets with keys, a flashlight, and popcorn for the show.
These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us.
He was trafficking in lies and conspiracies. He said that he never supported a national abortion ban. We have in writing a screenshot from his website wherein he supported a national abortion ban. So he was just lying with me.
If you're enjoying, hit subscribe. It helps more than you think. Tim Walz was gliding into 2025 wrapped in his carefully pressed Midwestern nice image, the political equivalent of comfort food, bland but reliable. Then Lindi Li showed up, skipping the polite knock and bulldozing straight through with sarcasm sharp enough to slice cheddar. Suddenly, the governor's spotless reputation looked less like a cozy casserole and more like forgotten leftovers. Mushy, questionable, and smelling worse the longer it sat out.
Who could possibly think it would be a good idea to lie about being in Tiananmen Square when you were in Nebraska? I mean, come on, it's just so beyond the pale. And now he's thinking about running for president. Didn't he get the memo that the American people do not want a second coming of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? And Kamala is in California considering a run for governor. We do not want any more DEI woke, any of that. We just don't. We're done with the woke and trans insanity.
Tim Walz has always been a branding exercise. The calm, steady leader who smiles and insists everything's fine while the house smolders behind him. He's the type to pat your shoulder and say, "Don't worry, I've got this under control," as your Wi-Fi crashes, the fridge dies, and a raccoon torches the garage. Folksy reassurance on the surface, chaos underneath. And now Lindi Li has ripped that image wide open, and everyone's staring at the wreckage.
What were they telling your mom, and how soon was it after the election? Like
a week or two. When it wasn't at that point, I was just asking questions. Like it wasn't even. I was like, what happened to the $2.5 billion we raised? Why did we spend it on Beyonce? Why did we spend 2.5? Why did we spend millions of dollars on Oprah? Like legitimate questions that needed to be answered. But the amount of hate I got for that was just overwhelming. And the final straw, the moment that I knew that I needed to leave, was actually around Christmas Eve.
To get the roast, you've got to get the costume. Walz built his persona like an IKEA shelf. Plain wood, functional, sturdy enough to display a few family photos, but wobbly if you look too close. He's the teacher-turned-politician, the neighbor you'd trust to water your plants, the dad joke guy who also commands the National Guard. On paper, it's tidy. In practice, it's particle board with mismatched screws that cost way too much. And the one who pointed it out, Lindi Li.
And then the biggest tell of the evening was when he told the moderators, well, I thought the rules stipulated, or something to the effect of the rules were saying that you weren't going to fact check. And you talked about own goals. That was an own goal. That said everything.
But
so
Lindi,
he was counting on the fact that no one was going to push back.
Are you frustrated then that Walz didn't make the argument that you're making to me right now?
I think he did a really good job tonight, and we had a live focus group at...
Lindi Li looked at Walz's record and basically said, "Nice mask. What's underneath?" That's when the receipts started flying. While Walz posed as the calm hand on the wheel, the car swerved like a teenager learning stick. His COVID policies were a masterclass in indecision. Shut it down, open it up, lock it again, shrug when confusion set in. He branded himself as pragmatic, but his version of pragmatic was just coin flipping dressed up as strategy. On crime, he tried straddling reform and law and order until he looked like a guy dancing on 2 boats. You know how that ends, wet. His talking points painted steady leadership, but the headlines told another story. And Li, she didn't just stop at contradictions. She roasted him with sarcasm sharp enough to make the hypocrisy impossible to unsee. The governor who claims the moral high ground is the same one cozying up to party insiders so tightly he could pass as DC furniture. Grassroots, he says. but you'd need a telescope to find them under all that establishment mulch.
Highest rating of the night when he pointed out that Trump completely failed on the border. He didn't deliver on the border wall that he promised. He blew up the border deal that we had border as a campaign issue. So he scored really highly also when he mentioned Matthew 25 and how his faith guides and inspires his empathy for people, a quality that Trump and Vance so abundantly lack.
Lindi didn't just poke holes in Walz's image. She shredded it into Swiss cheese, reminding everyone that polishing metals doesn't erase messy choices. What stings isn't just the inconsistency. It's that the everyman teacher vibe now feels less authentic and more like costume design. Think quirky indie band you thought was raw talent, only to learn they were manufactured in a boardroom for Target shopping suburban parents. That's Walz, the Target brand candidate. And now, as Harris's VP pick, the spotlight has gone from gentle glow to burning laser, magnifying every flaw once shrugged off in Minnesota. Enter Lindi Li, waving a neon sign that screams, "Y'all seeing this?" If Walz hoped to coast on cardigan charm, those days are over. Lindi didn't just present facts, she made them sting. And in politics, nothing sticks harder than a sting. Now his team faces the ugly choice: ignore her and look weak, or respond and make it bigger. But ignoring Lindi is like ignoring a fire alarm. You can cover your ears, but everyone else is already evacuating.
It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easy.
Addressing Lindi is the real trap. You're stepping onto her stage, where sarcasm is the sword and you're already bleeding. But here's the kicker. This isn't just about Walz. It's about a political system built on image management, and Walz is simply the latest face caught mid-costume change. Lindi Li's roast lands harder because she's not just critiquing, she's gleefully pointing out that the emperor's new clothes don't fit. And once that kind of exposure goes viral, it snowballs. Journalists, rivals, and armchair critics start poking at every crack, eager to see how deep they run. That's the power of a well-aimed sting. It doesn't end with one post. So now, while Walz tries to project himself as Harris's steady co-pilot, the internet is busy comparing his steady hand to a martini shaker in an earthquake. Lindi lit the match. The only question left is how big this fire gets. Watching the spin doctors scramble is like watching a cooking show contestant realize they forgot to preheat the oven. Chaos, panic, and no good way to plate it.
I want to take you back to the very first answer that he gave. Let's just remind ourselves, he sort of stumbled through. Right now the crisis in the Middle East is, front and center of the global news agenda, and we would expect maybe that someone who was running to be the vice president would have more confidence. Let's remind ourselves of what happened.
October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Walz's team now has to decide whether to lean harder into the cardigan charm or act like none of this ever happened. Spoiler, neither works. When Lindi Li roasts you, it's not a debate, it's a barbecue, and the smoke sticks. The go-to defense is always out of context, but at this point everything's out of context. Walz could trip over a garden hose and someone would spin it as an inspiring leap. Once people spot the pattern, no number of actually statements can stitch it back together. Predictably, media reactions split. Some outlets still frame him as the lovable Midwestern uncle with the hot dish, treating Lindi's takedown like just another spicy tweet to chuckle at. But others smell blood, and blood sells in politics. Suddenly, Walz's past compromises and contradictions aren't dusty statehouse footnotes. They're national headlines, splashed across chirons with the kind of ominous music you'd expect in a true crime doc.
What do you think happened when he gave that answer, Lindi?
Well, as I mentioned before, J.D. Vance went to Yale Law School. He is seasoned, and I said this in the previous interview. This is what he does. He's slick and he's sharp, but Walz is a fundamentally good guy. And our focus group of battleground voters, mind you, understand that. They perceive that this is a down-to-earth guy, salt-to-the-earth guy who wants the best for the American people versus Vance, who is backed by Peter Thiel and was a venture capitalist and is working for his billionaire crony.
And here's the kicker. Walz isn't built for this kind of spotlight. At the state level, you can get away with some mess if you smile and wave, but the national stage is ruthless. Your shoelaces get fact-checked. A calm tone and a dad joke about fishing season don't cut it when you're under the microscope. And thanks to Lindi, that lens is crystal clear. To regular viewers, the comedy writes itself. The man of the people now looks like a man reading from a script, his persona retuned for ratings. The timing couldn't be worse. Years ago, he might have papered over the cracks with photo ops and a bipartisan op-ed. But in a cycle this heated, where every move gets dissected like a frog in biology class, it's brutal. Voters don't want someone who promises to grow into the role. They want consistency, and they want it now.
I mean, I'm not on anyone's payroll. I'm not beholden to anyone. That's why I'm here telling the truth. I'm not here to gaslight anybody. This is just the truth.
What is the truth?
The truth is this is just an epic disaster. This is a $1 billion disaster. Actually, it was $1.018 billion, I think, right? There were $20 million or $18 million in debt.
Right.
It's incredible.
Lindi Li just showed that Walz's consistency is about as sturdy as a paper straw in a hurricane. Social media turned her takedown into a meme factory, with clips circulating under captions like, "Walz speedrun of hypocrisy." When your brand is Midwestern nice, but your record screams Midwestern chaos, the internet doesn't just expose, it amplifies. And once you become the punchline, good luck reclaiming the joke. But the real sting goes deeper than comedy. Politics runs on trust. Manufactured or genuine doesn't matter, as long as people believe it. Walz's whole appeal rests on being the steady hand, the trustworthy neighbor. Lindi ripped the rug out, showing that brand was more costume than character. Once voters spot the zipper on the mascot suit, convincing them it's a real bear is impossible. Walz isn't the first to be unmasked. American politics is littered with bulletproof brands that cracked under scrutiny. But here, the difference is timing and the messenger. Lindi Li doesn't just criticize, she entertains while doing it.
To that, I have friends that I have to be accountable to and to explain what happened, because I told them it was a margin of error race. I was promised, Jen O'Malley Dillon promised all of us that Harris would win. She even put videos out saying that Harris would win. I believed her. My donors believed her. And so they wrote massive checks. I feel like a lot of us were misled. And even on the night of election night, I looked somebody in the eye and I said, "Are we going to do this? Are we going to pull it off?" She told me yes. And I asked somebody else, like, "How are you feeling?" He's like, "We're going to win Iowa." And I was like,
that's lethal, because in today's media ecosystem, people don't share dry critiques. They share the roasts, the sarcasm, the clips that make them laugh while nodding in agreement. That's how narratives spread now. Accountability wrapped in entertainment. Meanwhile, Walz's opponents are quietly popping champagne. In politics, the real danger isn't getting attacked by rivals. It's getting exposed by someone who isn't even playing the game. That makes it authentic. That makes it stick. And you can bet the Harris campaign is sweating. A VP pick is supposed to add stability, not baggage. Walz was chosen as the steady co-pilot, safe, moderate, unlikely to overshadow the pilot. But thanks to Lindi, he now looks shaky instead of steady, rehearsed instead of reassuring. That's the last thing you want in a race where the other side is sharpening attack ads like medieval swords. What's striking is how fast the narrative flipped. Before Lindi's takedown, Walz barely registered on the national radar. Just a background character you'd Google after the VP announcement and forget 5 minutes later.
What's your take?
My take is the most neglected part of home ownership is the gutters. It's personal for me.
This is Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz making an appearance on the popular TikTok show Subway Takes.
Had problems with gutters before. You get your basement wet, you get ice dams, cause a lot of problems.
How often do you like looking at gutters?
I look quite often, surprisingly, because I kind of judge it. I try not to be judgmental on people, but when I see a well-tended gutter, it says a lot about it.
Now Walz is front-page news not for his policies, but for his contradictions. The political equivalent of being remembered not for your movie role, but for tripping on the red carpet. Memorable, yes, but not the way you want. And the more he tries to shrug it off, the worse it looks. A shrug feels like admission, a smile looks like pretending, and addressing it head-on just keeps the fire burning. It's a lose-lose. Walz built his brand on being the authentic, steady leader, but Lindi exposed how manufactured that brand really is. It's like peeling the organic label off a product and finding out it comes from the same factory as the cheap stuff. Once people see it, they can't unsee it. And here's the irony. Walz' unraveling isn't coming from scandal or corruption. It's coming from exposure, his image collapsing under the weight of its own inconsistencies. Death by 1,000 sarcastic cuts, each one amplified online until the branding can't hold together anymore.